Good evening. We'd like to call this meeting to order at 5:04 p.m., which is the February 5th, 2026 work study session. We do have a quorum, and we will stand now for the Pledge of Allegiance. There are no comment cards, and so we'll move on to our work study session, listening and to learn and align to lead, and I will transfer everything over to Dr. Menares, our superintendent. But prior to that, we'll have an adoption of the agenda.
I'll move it.
Thank you, Trustee Thomas. Second?
Second.
And properly moved by Trustee Thomas, seconded by Trustee Vane. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carried. Naras.
Thank you, President Glass. So tonight I am pleased with the team to share with you where we currently are, board, in bringing all of these different pieces of data together. So tonight is an example of our commitment of listening to learn so that we continue to build confidence and trust in our school district and moving together collectively as a team. So that includes listening to our families, our staff, including principals, counselors, teachers at our schools, custodial, everyone that makes up the Orange family, and most importantly, our scholars who we serve. So I'm happy to share this information. And who has the clicker? Okay. Actually, let's go ahead and keep it up front. Yes. So Christina, if you'll, I'll let you know when to forward. So we can go ahead and go to the next slide, which are our objectives for this evening. So we really kind of have this in three parts. First, you'll hear from me to share the themes from the Listening and Learning Tour, just to give you an overview of what we captured, how many people we were able to engage with, and what came out of that. Then you'll hear from Dr. Lynn, who will also share the themes from the LCAP, what was captured there, and how these two pieces of data sets come together to give some nice direction for the district as we move forward with our strategic roadmap. And so the last part will be hearing from Dr. Whitmer, and we have our partner here with us if you have questions, Dr. Keenan Mitchell from Inspire School Solutions. You approved that contract last board meeting, but he's here. He's going to be the one that will work with us to put the strategic roadmap in place, refining our graduate profile, and all those segments coming together, so that when we start the school year next school year, we'll have a firm picture of where we're going as a district, a roadmap that's broad enough that can be nimble as things change in our world and in our local and state context, but also a North Star of what do we want to see for our graduates when they walk across that stage. So Listening and Learning Tour. Thank you. You read my mind, Dr. Lynn. So the purpose of the tour, as you recall, was to elevate the voices of those in our community. I held them at our high schools for the most part. One was at our elementary school. It was really about where we would have space, and asked the same questions of everybody, and used Thought Exchange as the platform to capture the information. In those questions, asked about the strengths of the district, opportunities for improvement, and help ask them to prioritize. And it gave some district-wide themes that we will talk about. Next slide. In total, 941 people were the total participants that actually logged into the Thought Exchange. Forgot to mention, I also held some sessions at our maintenance and operations yard to hear from our CSEA, met with our cafeteria staff, just the people that we wanted to make sure we heard from, and tried to get as everybody as possible, including the superintendent student advisory. The Thought Exchange asks people to answer questions, and then very much like a social media platform, like what you agree with. And so you can see that we had 379 responses of strengths, meaning someone put a strength in and someone else said, yes, I agree with that. And so it helped things to rise to the top. What I also really appreciate about Thought Exchange is you can choose the language that you receive the information in, and provide it in that language as well. So it's transferable, so we didn't have to worry about making sure that there was enough translation, as long as you did feel comfortable using the device. When I held a parent meeting at El Medina Resource Center and at Family Friendly Center, to try to get outreach to our historically underserved community. We didn't use Thought Exchange there. It didn't work as well, so we just captured the information, but then we plugged it into the system. Just so you know, we really did try to find ways to get to our community. I wasn't as pleased with the participation as I had hoped, but the LCAP survey gave us a lot of information, so then we were able to correlate them together, so that was helpful. Next slide. So what did we hear? We heard facilities and class size was a really big piece from our families, from our staff. Everybody talked about both of those pieces simultaneously and in different ways. We heard about the importance of staff compensation and retention. And on this one, it's really about making sure that we keep those who are so dedicated to Orange in our district, and we continue to have opportunities to grow them, and that they are also compensated fairly compared to our surrounding districts. And we understand that in the County of Orange, we have a variety of different types of districts that receive different types of funding. So we're not talking about the districts that have basic aid where they are funded much more than us. Really, it's about making sure that we can keep our staff and be competitive in recruiting staff within our existing budget and having that fiscal responsibility. So we heard that from many different people across the board, not just from staff. I want that to be, parents said it too. We heard around student support and well-being, so making sure that we have support systems in place for our youth. And that included, intervention type of work, additional staff at schools as we think about our elementary schools that run without assistant principals and how to support that, which really dovetails into the retention and compensation, because we want to be able to grow our staff and grow those who may start in our district in whatever capacity. They may go from instructional aides to teachers or counselors, but they may have desires to have more formalized leadership positions, and having those opportunities to experience that. That's part of the student support. Also included having campuses that see the whole child, and really creating that space where children and families feel welcomed and safe, and that they have that sense of belonging. And then finally, communication and transparency. So this came out in lots of different ways, making sure that we have timely communication, understanding that we are in a world where social media moves quickly, but that we have consistent communication and ways to get information to our families and our staff, and that and in the lack of consistent communication, there tends to be a feeling of transparency, a lack of transparency, or that something's being hidden. And so really working on how do we have consistent communication so that people feel we're transparent and honest, even when they may not like the information, at least they have the information. So this came out as themes that were pretty loud and clear across the board. Next slide. We felt like you really should hear the strengths that they said are really important to our district. So everyone across the board, including our children, said that there are dedicated and caring staff in Orange. People really, really love the children and love the community. And I felt that the minute I got here. And you know that we've had newer administration coming on board, and they too will echo that same sentiment. So there is a deep, caring sense of community here in Orange, and we want to preserve that and continue to grow it. There's also, because a lot of our staff grew up here, they raised their children here, they may have multiple generations here, Mr. Trustee Thomas. That's another strength of it, that we have this very supportive alumni community. That's a great opportunity for the district to really think about how do we bring that alumni in to further develop our district and what we can do collectively. And then finally, the community shared in different ways. The diversity of the community is a strength. And the diversity was not specific to race, it was not specific to language, it was just that we are a diverse community, and that is a strength of ours that we should celebrate and highlight. So those are the strengths that came out as the top to preserve. The challenges, which go back to those themes, is the compensation pressures, right, and making sure that we are competitive, and aligning that with being fiscally responsible. The gaps in communication, as I shared, so just trying to make the invisible visible with as much information that can be provided, because not always can we provide everything, but can we be more intentional about what we do share and the frequency and the timeliness of it? And then, as we've already stated, aging facilities and crowded classrooms. Now, our second part of tonight's board session will be talking about really the bold measure that this board has already taken as it relates to facilities and the amount of money that you've already allocated there. We have some plans that we'd like to share with you. So we're already going to start addressing this, but it is a huge need. Next slide. So then after we got the initial 972 or whatever that, 900 plus people, and we got the themes, pushed it out one more time and said, all right, here it is, here's the themes, now help us prioritize. And that was not an easy task. And I knew it was not going to be easy. And I got some feedback from people saying, this was not easy, you shouldn't have done it this way. It's nearly impossible. And it was impossible, it was difficult. But I wanted to hear what people thought. And so we got 489 people. We gave a short window, we gave 1 week to prioritize. And they had to choose on a scale of 1 to 5, what's the top priority, 1 being the most important, and 5 being the least important. I'll tell you that there was a difference of like 0.1% between everybody. So the next slide shares what that is. So the one that came out the top was facilities and learning environments. 2.42 was the number. So that was the most important, but not very far ahead of the staff compensation and support, keeping our most talented and bringing in the most talented so they can be in front of our youth, doing what they do best. That was at 2.49, so not much of a difference. Then student support, making sure that we have ways to just make sure the whole child is being met. That was at 2.53. And then finally, communication and engagement, or the transparency, that was at 2.57. So you can see very minimal differences between all of them, all very important. Helps us, though, when we think about a long-range strategic roadmap, what do we start with? Doesn't mean we don't do the others, but you only have so much time in a day, a week, and a month. How do we prioritize our time as we move through the development of this roadmap, and then more importantly, the implementation of it? 2 more slides just to go a little bit deeper. So on the priority areas, and when we pushed the survey out, gave a little description of what this meant. So facilities and learning environments talked about that this priority area would be around the aging facilities, improving learning spaces, and the crowded classrooms. Of course, our teachers are like, yes, please, our crowded classrooms. Now, we may not be able to meet that need, but we might be able to do things around staffing ratios and those type of things. And that would be helpful, especially for our youngest scholars who come from a TK classroom of 20 students and 2 adults to a kindergarten classroom that could be up to 33 with 1 adult. That's a big jump for a little one, let alone the adults that are trying to meet their varying needs. So that is one area, as we talked about, what this would mean, facilities and learning environments. Staff compensation was about pay, but also benefits. And we know over the last, I'm going to say 15 years, the cost of benefits have continued to rise and rise and rise. So keeping up with that while, again, maintaining our fiscal responsibility and keeping our very beloved staff members in our district and giving those opportunities to grow. On the student support, whole child work, academic supports, emotional supports, how do we use our after-school time to enrich, to further develop? And how do we support our teachers? We've heard our teachers say there's some behavioral supports that we need in our schools, and And we've started working on that. I'm very grateful to Dr. Singh and the team for jumping on that and really moving some of that work. But we have a lot more to do in that area. And then communication, clear, consistent communication, so that we continue to earn the trust of our community and our staff, and so that we develop shared understanding. And I'm going to say on a personal note, I need to keep getting better at that with people, because you don't know, you don't know what you don't know, and like, oh, I got to go backwards a little bit and now share this because I didn't realize that that hadn't been shared, or it hadn't been done in a way that people had received it. So this is definitely an opportunity, an area for improvement. So that's the listening and learning. So that was a lot. I'm actually going to pause. Do you have any questions on that before we jump into the LCAP survey?
I don't have a question, but I do want to make a comment, and this is just an observation. So in 2019, we did the strategic initiative where we had 1,000 members of the public come in, and we had thought exchanges and all of that. And I will say that it's very consistent with what it was in 2019. So that sort of, I think, gives more credence even to what you heard, is that these are still repeated issues that we've been hearing. The one area where I don't think we heard much was on the staff compensation and support. That to me is a new thing, and that may be a result of some of the upheaval we had in the last couple of years, and people are watching a little bit more. So just an observation. I don't know if that's where it comes from, but that's definitely something newer. And I will say that in terms of student support, what I've noticed changed over time is definitely that behavioral mental health support requests, whereas a few years ago, a lot of it seemed more focused on academic support and like having more career counselors and things like that. That seemed to come up a lot back then. So just for historical context, that it's very, very consistent. And then those are the things that have emerged, I think, newer in the last tour. So
That's interesting.
just an observation.
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I know you did a lot to push this out. I myself received it multiple times. One thing I was wondering is, you mentioned that not everyone participated in the thought exchange or, had the device. So do you have a sense, I know it's hard anecdotally, the percent of people that were physically there that did it?
Anecdotally, I would say about 85% of the people there were doing it. What I noted, and you see it in the numbers too, they would go into the first question and they would start putting things in there that weren't the strengths. They would put like, here's an opportunity for improvement, and here's, so it didn't, it fell out in different ways. But to me, that wasn't important. We can still capture it all.
Yeah,
so
you just do the best you can with it.
Exactly. So it was about 85%. And those who didn't, I think it was more of, they may not put something in, but I would see them looking at their phones and liking it. So they didn't necessarily add to it, but they did help to prioritize.
Have you, or I don't know if the thought exchange has this capacity, thought about making like a Wordle?
It actually does have that capacity, and we did play with that, didn't we? We could probably take that definitely to the strategic. So we do have and I did not share this, when I asked them to prioritize at that survey, we also asked, if you're interested in being part of the strategic roadmap committee, please give us your name. So we got how many people? We got a lot of people. 40 something, right? Does that sound right? Am I making that number up? Okay, we have quite a few, both parents and staff, and so when we bring them together, we can definitely share that Wordle, and then we can bring it to you when we come back for updates. But yes, it does have that capacity.
That'd be interesting. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And then one quick question about, I know that you did quite a bit, you and your staff, to get the information out. So my question is, do we have an understanding on which groups were least represented in the information and the data collection?
Our data would show that mostly who attended were parents. Now, you know that a lot of our parents are also staff. So that's a cross mix. What I would say is it was not as well attended by some of the families who may typically not come anyway. That's the part that I was hoping to get more on. And that's why we held it in some other places that they may feel more comfortable going to. But still, and I know this to be the case because we didn't have to do a lot of translation for any, but that's not the only group that I feel like was not represented. Okay, so Dr. Lin, now it's your turn to share the data of LCAP, and she will not only share the data of LCAP, but then give you like the integration of listening and learning and LCAP, and some also potential actions that you should anticipate seeing in our LCAP for this school year, for next school year, but coming up soon.
Definitely. Good evening, Board, Trustee, Calvin, and members of the community. The superintendent had just shared an overview of the Listening and Learn Tour, an important demonstration of our commitment to community engagement and a key source of input for building OUSD's strategic roadmap. I will now transition to the LCAP survey result, which serve as the second pillar of our data gathering effort. The LCAP survey gives us a district-wide snapshot of what our educational partners are experiencing and what they need the most. It helps us identify priorities, guide actions and resources, and stay accountable to continuous improvement. This year, we heard from over 21,000 students, families, staff, and community members. This level of participation strengthens the credibility of our data and allows us to use this result to inform decisions, prioritize actions, and allocate resources in ways that are responsive to the needs of our educational partners. Across all respondent groups, several consistent themes emerged, including staff and instructional programs, facility and learning environments, technology access, student support and well-being, and communication with families. These themes are intended to frame our discussion, helping us to explore where we are seeing the alignment, where there may be gaps, and how these insights should inform future priorities, resource allocation, and LCAP actions. Together, they provide a shared foundation for thoughtful dialogue as we continue developing OUSD's strategic roadmap. As we review the survey result, it's important to begin with the strengths consistently identified by our educational partners: dedicated staff, positive learning environments, strong academic and enrichment opportunities, student leadership, and meaningful family partnerships. These strengths help us understand what is working well and what we wanted to sustain. At the same time, they provide important context as we transition to the next slide, where we will examine areas of opportunity and consider how future LCAP actions and resources can be most effectively targeted. As we shift to areas for improvement, these themes reflect areas where our educational partners have identified a need for additional focus. Consistent concerns surface around facility and learning environment, reliability and access to technology, student safety and behavior, communication with families, and class size and academic support. Building on themes and areas of need we've just reviewed, this slide outlines possible actions for the 2026-27 LCAP. These reflect initial areas for consideration informed by educational partner feedback and are intended to help connect identified needs to potential direction for action. The focus is on strengthening facilities and maintenance, improving reliability and equity of technology, supporting student behavior and social emotional needs, enhancing communication and family engagement, and expanding access to academic support. Together, these possible actions help frame how feedback from both Listening to Learn Tour and the LCAP survey may translate to priority as we move forward. With that context, I will now turn the presentation over to Dr. Whitmer, our Assistant Superintendent of Educational Services, who will share the information on how these two surveys align and support the development of OUSD's strategic roadmap.
Thank you, Dr. Lin. Good evening, trustees. I'll raise this a little bit. So as you heard, we've had a broad sampling across the district. We had 941 responses from listening and learning, 489 responses from the prioritization survey, and 21,267 responses from the LCAP survey, which brings us to about 22,697 responses. This provided both depth and breadth in terms of the responses that we received. The key takeaway is that our strategic priorities are really grounded in clear patterns across thousands of data points, ensuring the credibility and the trust for this process. Across these groups, when you put all the data together and tease out focus areas or themes, we see 5 clear areas: teaching and learning, facilities and infrastructure, wellness and safety, family and community engagement, and extracurricular and advanced opportunities. And on the slides, you see some of the quotes that were pulled from the data, which is interesting, and I love reading the one under teaching and learning. I sincerely believe the majority of staff members do it for the students. The students are our future. It's our focus. This alignment is key for us. The input's cohesive, it's not fragmented. It gives us a strong shared foundation as we move forward. So from vision to implementation, we'll consider OUSD's long-term priorities, translating them into coherent strategies and aligning resources, systems, and supports to sustain our implementation. Our work will be anchored to the graduate profile, which will be revisited during this process, to keep student outcomes at the center of the conversations. The result will be a multi-year strategic roadmap, a year 1 implementation map, and then clear direction for future decision making. We'll start with a review of key district documents. In fact, we've collected dozens, if not hundreds of documents already. From there, we'll engage stakeholders through surveys, focus groups, student forums, community input, and trustee listening. All feedback will be systematically synthesized, ensuring decisions are informed by evidence and inclusive of voice. The result is a shared understanding of our district's strengths and needs before strategy is finalized. From January through July, we'll follow a phased planning process with clear checkpoints. This will begin with listening and discovery, moving into visioning and alignment, and then translating vision into action through strategy, design, and system alignment. A draft plan will be vetted through structured feedback before returning to the board. In July, we'll bring forward a strategic map with a clear path for year 1 implementation and providing us with direction and continuity well beyond the initial planning cycle. At this point, we're going to provide you with several prompts for discussion under 3 areas. First, validating alignment. Based on what you've seen, do the themes, priorities, and proposed roadmap reflect the district's most critical areas of focus? Identifying gaps. Are there any priorities, perspectives, or areas that may be missing or need stronger emphasis? And guiding the strategic plan. What guidance would you like to provide to inform the development of the district's strategic plan moving forward? To assist us, I'm going to invite Dr. Keenan Mitchell to the podium with me. He's the founder and CEO of Inspire School Services, who's partnering with OUSD to help facilitate the strategic mapping. Dr. Mitchell brings more than 20 years of educational leadership experience, including service as a former superintendent. He's nationally recognized for his work in strategic planning, systems, and organizational design, and executive leadership coaching. So we are here to answer questions and provide clarity that you seek. So Dr. Mitchell is available as well. Thank you.
What we'll do as a board is we'll go through each of the discussion questions. We can start with validate alignment. And if there's questions, as Dr. Whitmer just shared, we can ask either of the gentlemen that are in front of us in order for us to get some clarity. Is there anyone who has questions that they want to pose at this particular time?
This is excellent work, and it's incredible that we have so many data points to look at. Phenomenal. And I know that we also are involved in the community in different committees and things. And as I said, even 5 years ago, the community was talking about these. We've developed, in some ways, it's a good thing because we are talking about different areas of student support, and then when you look at the strengths, it looks like we met a lot of those needs, or we are meeting them, I should say. We're making progress in some of those areas over the last 5 years. But that means that there's other needs that need to be focused on. But I am so happy that you did it this way, that it's so organized, that it is the timeline, the map. Like, this is how you do it. You create a plan, and then you implement a plan. And that seems really basic, but it's incredible. And it's incredible when it's informed by so much data. One of the areas, I think, because one of the biggest concerns that has remained, that existed before and exists now and is probably going to exist in the future as well, is facilities. And so with that, any plan, I think, is going to have to really incorporate or consider funding sources. Things like what's out there for grant money, what's out there for matching funds, what's out there for partnerships with nonprofits or partnerships even with other districts, or those sorts of things. So I would like to see that sort of layered into this strategy so that we have a realistic map forward. And our progress is going to be small bites, right? And so we're going to make progress in that way. But I think that helps us as a board to prioritize knowing, particularly as it relates to facilities, knowing what we actually realistically can do. And what we can't do, how are we going to fill that need? So that's my kind of question, comment, and I don't know if that was contemplated within this, or I know it's sort of like the beginning stages, so I don't know how you would incorporate that into it.
Dr. Mitchell, any thoughts?
Thank you for your question and comments, and thank you, board, for having me tonight. I want to commend this board and superintendent and her staff for all this data. To your point, it's informing a really high quality strategic planning process. And so it's just really good to come into this this nexus of all this data and there's energy. And so the stage is set for some really good planning. To address your question, I think you start with the graduate profile, trying to figure out what do we want our seniors to look like and be able to do at the completion of their time here. And I think that looking at partnerships and to your point, grants and matching funds, opportunity, obviously we can't do everything, but we certainly want to have an idea of where we want our seniors to have access to, what kind of facilities would support the direction that we're going. Also, what kinds of training and capabilities and capacity do we need to build with teachers to make that happen? And so I think that there's some partnerships with community colleges, nonprofits that may be able to do some things beyond just the building itself. And so we'll be exploring all of those avenues once we get started.
I know we also are doing that and working on that with behavioral mental health issues and adopting programs and having partners that are helping to bring in and generate revenue. And that's incredible, like that we're on that. So that I know that there's sort of programs out there that we are accessing some of, but there may be more that maybe we don't know. And I don't know how we figure that out. That's up to you guys to figure it out. But I know that we had a presentation by Dr. Singh at LegCo where she talked about some of the funding for mental health services. And that's a perfect example of, look, we have this need. This is what we want to do. And this is how it's going to help be funded. And that helps inform us too. So thank you. That's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you again for the presentation. There's a lot of highlights in here. I'm sure there's a lot of data behind every single one of the points. And looking at the possible actions for LCAP for the following year, a lot of them could be woven together, right? Like it's almost like a domino effect of how each of these could affect the other. So if we have at the very basic cleanliness within our facilities where our students feel like it's their second home, that they are more likely to continue with like thriving with academics or student behaviors and different things like that. So my question is more for student behaviors that we're noticing now and also the academic support and learning access. The subpoints for both of those are essentially expanding what we're already doing. And the question that I'm posing to the team is, what if that's potentially the wrong direction? Like we need to relook at what exists now. And maybe that's something that needs to change before we expand and add more resources to what already exists. Like earlier it was shared that the generation of students that we have now learn completely differently, and the behaviors that exist in the classroom are completely different than they were before with previous generations. And so maybe our strategies and our practices that are being implemented also need to adapt to what exists now. And so I'm not saying that this is going to happen overnight or even within the next couple years, but I think it is something, if it reflects back to our graduate profile where this is like our students that are seniors, these are the outcomes that they'll have as they go out into society. Maybe we need to look back at what's happening in TK, kindergarten, first grade, so that we set them up for success.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Trustee Martinez-Goodlander. Appreciate that. And that's the perspective that we also need to consider with your early childhood education background. I don't have that, so it's important. When I look at it from the graduate profile point of view, I look at students taking AP or IB or honors, et cetera, and then I kind of backwards map, as you probably already do, Dr. Mitchell. But at the same time, going all the way back to TK, that's critical. And then the probably in addition to whatever we can do with parents to support them, that would be important as well. So I want to just state before I pass it down to my other colleagues that my answer is yes to validate alignment. My answer is yes. And I believe we started off with the conversation about facilities. I think that's critical. We've already taken those steps. I think the other steps that we have made mention of is the student supports. That came up in the data. As I mentioned earlier, I think that the data is rich. It's undeniable, quite frankly, and it's qualitative and it's quantitative. And having said that, I think it's so important for us to do something probably outside of the box to address the different needs that students have with regards to their well-being, because it's being mentioned not only by their parents, but by the students themselves. And that may not be something that we have. So to Trustee Martinez-Goodlander's point, we may be going down the wrong path, but I think it's important for us to go down a path and then pivot if we need to. So I'm very comfortable with that. I'm speaking for myself. I'm very comfortable with taking some sort of action in order to make that wellness happen for our students. And then secondarily, not necessarily in that rank order, but secondarily for our staff and teachers to do the same, and that speaks again to the behaviors in the classrooms. So I'll stop there. Colleagues, anyone else want to make comments regarding validate alignment? Trustee Vane.
I'd like to echo my colleagues' words about the amazing data that's been collected, and the synthesis process has been really helpful. One thing that I think would help me is on the roadmap part, what are the touch points for feedback and evaluation as to, how this is going? Is that occurring, every 6 months? What does that look like? How are we reflecting on how well this is going? I think some others have mentioned it's important that we adapt or, see how it goes. So I'd like to see some of that, integrated into the roadmap. And that's my only comment on this part.
I think my colleagues have covered quite a bit of it. So I want to thank you too for the alignment. I think this is wonderful. I mean, this is the first that I've seen this in a long time. So it gives us something to work towards. I have more comments on the gaps part, so I'm going to just go ahead and go on. Yeah. Yeah.
Sure, we covered everyone. Anyone else have any comments regarding this first question? Okay, then we will move to identify gaps. Are there any important priorities or perspectives that may be missing or need stronger emphasis? So opening up to the floor. Trustee Yamasaki, you want to begin?
Okay, sure, since I mentioned it. The area that I wanted to talk about was the family and community engagement. I feel like it's so important when students come to school and they feel like they're connected to their schools. I also feel like it's important when families feel like they're connected and they understand. And I think one of the missing components that we have is that a lot of our families only relate to the school but not really to the district. And I remember, I think it was pre-COVID, we had a district-wide event. And we had schools come together, and I thought it was wonderful, and I'd like to see some things like that again, where they can connect with other parts of the district. Because right now, Anaheim Hills sort of stays in this area, West Orange and East Orange and Villa Park, so they don't have that connection with each other unless they're competing in athletics. But, having district-wide science fair, district-wide competitions. I love the foundation games. We hear a lot of great things from our Special Olympics. And so I think more of those kind of things where families feel like our district is doing a lot for our families and the schools is critically important for me.
I just want to emphasize, when we started bringing the superintendent student advisory together and we had youth from, we have about, I think, 5 to 6 students from each high school, they said this was the first time that they, in this age group, right, had been able to be in the same room and hear about what's going on at other schools. So that sentiment exists amongst our youth as well.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments regarding this question, identify gaps? Trustee Vane.
A lot of these different discussion points are kind of intermingled, but I agree with Trustee Martinez-Goodlander about the interconnectedness of different parts of the plan. For example, the staffing model with class size and facility, it would be helpful to kind of also see, obviously it's a very bigger picture, but making sure that all of those parts are interconnectedness, and a reminder, when we're discussing the facilities, that you might recall that we adjusted class size according to this, and here's how, these different parts are connected. I also would like to see, in terms of gaps, innovation. So we have that bit on technology, but also we have new technologies. How are we being innovative and tackling AI and cell phones and, all of those things, and making sure that we are not only looking at what's out there, but forward thinking and being innovative. Also with regard to funding, innovative grants and those sorts of things. Thank you.
Okay, so I want to expand on the mental health and anti-bullying supports. And I think there have been many steps in the last year or 2 years of expanding those opportunities, whether it's from our staff at the district office having parent workshops where they get to be invited either virtual or in person on different things that are happening, of like how to, you know, support your child through different behaviors, or, you know, your child is experiencing anxiety, what can you do at home? Like that information is very helpful for families because I know they're asking for it. A potential barrier that I see is how it's being promoted. So it goes back to that communication piece of like, how are we disseminating the information? And then the twofold to that is, what's the language that we're using? Not language in terms of translation, but what's the language that we're using that makes sense to families to invite them? Like, what are the expectations on the parent? Like, what are they gonna gain by attending this? And maybe we use the analogy of like basically PDs for educators, of like, we almost bribe them to come, especially if it's like an OCDE training or different thing of like, you're gonna get this take home to support with your classroom. But maybe that's what we do with families as well, of like, come pick up your mental health kit, here's everything you're gonna learn, and here's some strategies that you can do at home as well. Again, I'm gonna go back to the early ed because that's what I'm comfortable with, but I'm sure there's different examples of take home things for different ages, but maybe they do take home stress balls, and it's not just squeezing it, because that's probably what older children can do with the stress ball when doing breathing techniques, but offering other techniques that they can do with it as well. Or things that they already have at home, you know, so if we play with bubbles, like there's so many other things that could happen with bubbles, of like breathing techniques, or just de-escalation. And that's just one example. So I think just changing communication so that it makes sense to the family, in addition to all the other barriers that I'm sure came out in the LCAP as well, of like the timing of it, whether it's in person or not in person, and the translation pieces there too. There have been some barriers that I've seen at school sites when trying to invite families to say, you know, the district is hosting an event for parents. There's way too many barriers unless we invite them personally and bring them to it, and like consistently share why parents should be participating in parent-focused workshops. I think that's the challenge that I know everyone has seen, because we've also heard from staff that they're providing a lot of the resources, but there isn't a connection of like the amount of people showing up, whether there's lack of show up or interest. And I don't think it's that parents aren't interested. Like, we need to find out what that gap is. And then with expanding mental health opportunities, we have wellness centers at our high schools, and I think some of our middle schools as well. How are they being utilized, and like, how are we really bringing in students to know how to properly use them? Is there a consistent message between different sites of how students know if they are in a crisis, when they can go without all the additional barriers, right? Like, do I need to get permission from my teacher? Do I need to get a pass? Like, do I need to then build my case of like, I really do need to leave to go to the wellness center, and without having the shame or humiliation of having to remove themselves from that environment. And then once they get to the wellness center, is it properly funded to have all the things that they need to do once they're there? So those are some of the gaps that I've seen. Completely well-intended. Again, like, we had fully dedicated staff, but what can we do on our end to fully support them to make sure that they have everything they need?
Trustee Erickson?
Now my thoughts are going to be completely all over the place because everybody made such good points. So I don't know if I can even pull them together to sound intelligent. But I think we all know when we go to schools, there are very different, it is different. And you may have the same like number of parents that are present, but the energy is very different sometimes. And I feel like as a district, we need to sort of figure out, what does participation mean in certain areas? Like, it doesn't always have to look exactly the same, but what's valuable in a community that maybe they don't have the ability to show up for a program or whatever, but what else can we do to make that participation meaningful in that community or with whichever group doesn't feel as connected? And also find out, is it in fact true that they don't feel connected? So, you know, how is it that we are communicating in a way and making sure that the expectations for each school are the same district-wide, not the same actions, and everything doesn't look the same, but we're prioritizing every single community in a way that's relevant to their community and to what can happen there, if that makes sense. That made probably no sense, so I apologize. But it's an equity sort of issue, and how are we addressing that, and how are we really ensuring, because these are very broad issues, but they look different, probably not staff compensation and retention, but they look very different in different communities. One communication strategy isn't necessarily going to be effective throughout the entire, and that goes to Trustee Goodlander Martinez. I'm sorry, I haven't said it yet. Her point. So I'll just echo everybody else and throw that out there.
And I'd like to piggyback on that because that's part of my question. And I'll say it this way. I mean, I think in a lot of ways, you've identified a lot of things that need to happen, and we've started some actions in order to address those things. And the data shows that some of our historically underserved populations are concerned about access. So in an effort to really address those needs, I think what can happen is we address those needs and bring them up to speed, if you will, but then they're still behind. You see what I'm saying? So that's going to be a problem moving forward, and we have to figure out a way to stop that, because the realities, not just here, but in a lot of different places, is that those students end up going to the schools where those programs take place, and then we do not address the needs of the students in the place where they left. So I think that's an area that needs to, you could consider addressing. And I think that realistically, that uneven access, unless we stop it, unless we really address it squarely, we're going to have a problem. And that's, you know, historically we've seen that. We've seen that, and that's what parents do. They take their children to the place where the particular item is available to them. So the other part to that is the navigation of services. Because if we don't have, and it's been spoken, this board has spoken eloquently on those points when it comes to how do we address these matters with our students and our parents, how do we give them the best information, are they coming to the board, the meetings that are available to them. But I would also say that awareness of opportunities is always late. They may find out about something much later than someone else, and being in a school environment where you're there potentially up to 7, now 8 years, they're woefully behind once they get to the middle school environment, and that's where, you know, I'm better suited when it comes to 7th grade through 12th, and whether or not that student's ready, you know, you're going to have a problem, even with electives. Even with that elective wheel, the opportunity to be aware of what's available to them is going to be lacking. So I'd like to see that addressed, and if there's anything that we need to talk more about, that's fine as far as my opinion regarding what's here with that, because I think it's been spoken very well here, but I think also it may be something that parents that weren't there are addressing through their representatives, right? So whoever was in this data set, they made that clear, and it was clear enough that it was strong. It was a strong, it wasn't an outlier, it was a strong statement that was made. Any other questions about identify gaps?
Just to also say that community schools, I think, has made a massive difference in terms of how we're communicating in the communities, and I think that that's a point. And so I do feel like we've made tremendous progress, and that may be an area that is a focus when we're looking at these different things, is utilizing that process that is has made massive improvements. So
Trustee Martinez Goodlander.
I think I was just going to add to your point of when we discuss that there's a gap, sometimes we just add more supports or services on what already exists. And I think, especially with our historically underserved, the process looks different. So it's not that we're just adding on more social media posts or expanding our social media posts, because the thought could be that, well, everybody's on social media, but we haven't asked the question, like, how do they receive information and then determine whether to show up? So if that's the case, like, you know, we need to start asking those questions to those populations of, you know, how do you receive information? And most likely it's the comadre that's standing outside at drop-off at the same time, right? Of like sharing, like, did you hear about this? I heard about this. Or my counselor told me that I need to go to this. Come with me so I don't go by myself. And so one pathway could be building parent leaders, right? Like, how do we build like family champions in our communities, especially the ones that aren't resourced with PTAs? And because they also need to build capacity, and we could build those parent champions to be the ones to disseminate information and gather the feedback, because other families trust them, right? They're the trusted messenger from their school site to be able to share a lot of the messaging that's happening.
That's outstanding. Trustee Vane.
One more gap, and it may be that some people mentioned it, but it didn't rise, you know, as high as the others. But I don't see it in either strengths or areas of improvement, is transportation. And so for me, in order to have this access, and because all of our schools are so different, really thinking through what kind of transportation do we have, and can, you know, I think Trustee Glass said earlier, you know, parents will take their kids to where they need to go for the programs, but that's not always the case. And so if we think through that, and we've looked at, you know, the patterns in the students who are walking, and I just would like to see that integrated, I guess, into all of these parts, right? It touches innovation, and it touches facilities, and the kinds of programs that we offer at the different areas. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? So we'll transition to the third, which is guide the strategic plan. What guidance would the trustees like to provide to inform the development of the district's strategic plan moving forward? So what guidance would the trustees like to provide? Or like provided? Is that what you want, like provided? What guidance would the trustees like to provide?
Provide going forward, yes.
Well, I'll start by saying this. I think this is such an outstanding document with the work. I remember back in June when our superintendent said she was going to go on this 100-day journey to speak to the community, stakeholders, et cetera. I gave her the guidance at that point to slow down. Don't fall off the cliff, because there's a lot of work. But in combination with the work that's been done with the LCAP, et cetera, I think it's a very important thing to consider, because those are multiple measures, right? And it gives us an opportunity to not just understand what the voice of our community is, but also what the data actually says with respect to qualitative and quantitative data, the mixed method. I think right now, the guidance that I would give is the depth and the breadth, as you mentioned. I think it's important to do that so we gather as much information as we can and make it actionable. But I think it's important just to start. If we just vacillate on things, nothing's going to get done, and we need to start with something, because in some of the analysis, I think our community wants to see something visible happen. They want that impact sooner than later. The talk, we've been doing this for a long time. I mean, if we hear Trustees Erickson and Yamasaki, they've been having these conversations since the late teens, right? and some of that data has been brought forward, and then nothing's happened with it, and then we come back to it. So we need to get started with something for the purpose of our parents, of our students, and our community. And I think the sooner we do that, the better. Anyone else from our board, our trustees, want to comment on guidance for or a charge? I would like to say charge. And that's what I was thinking.
I think just to piggyback on that, I mean, making it actionable, truly. Obviously, we need to dream and have a vision, and that's, this 3-year or longer term, but really having actionable chunks that can be taken and understood by the community, and then when we do take those steps and we do take those chunks, what's going to be the method to communicate that we've done it? Because in fairness, we have talked about a lot of these issues, but we have done a lot of work in terms of facilities over the last 7 or 8 years, we've actually invested about $500 million into facilities between the Measure S and the other things that we've done in deferred maintenance. So nobody should interpret what we say as saying we just haven't done anything. Not true. We've been making progress, a lot of progress, and we did have a strategic initiative, and we have made steps towards it. Mm-hmm. We have certainly had times when we haven't been able to make that progress, and we have buffered for a long time. I think a lot, I think the deferred maintenance that we're going to talk about later kind of shows that we've slowed down in certain areas, and we need to pick that back up. But I do think it is important to be actionable in the short term, be funded in the short term as much as we can, or have a plan to do that, or find funding, and communicate when we have accomplished things and are moving towards it. That's all.
Thank you.
So years ago, we had a strategic plan. We worked on it. Thousands of people, hundreds of people worked on it. And obviously, that is now somewhat sunsetted, right? And this is, I see, is what's going to be replacing that. But the one thing I did like is that when there was something done, initiative, a program, or project, it would always align to one of the strategic initiatives, and it was numbered, 5.3 under this, and then that way we can see that there's a direct correlation to our plan, and then we can see the actual accomplishments in that area. So I would like to see something similar to that, if you found that useful, because I found it, helpful.
Are you talking about like they used to have on the agenda, this aligns with
Yes.
whatever it is, so that when we were taking a vote or talking about it, we knew
That
what
was one of
area
the
we were aligning with.
priorities
Right.
that is aligned with our strategic plan. So something to consider, if it works for you.
Works for them. Thank you. Trustee Vane?
I remember the numbers when I first started. For me, if I think about it as project management, right? I don't mean for the numbers to just like make more work for people, tying them in all the time, but it would be helpful for me to just like have a Google Doc, with red and green and yellow, here's where we are on all of the numbers, so that we could refer to it. I'm sure that that's out there and exists, but the colors, I think, would be helpful on that front. In terms of other guidance, I'm not sure how to articulate this in the plan, but it comes up in different places. We haven't discussed it explicitly, and that is leadership. And I do want to ensure that our staff are growing, but also finding some way to make this plan accessible and inspiring. And I know we had the EDGE acronym before, but I think it goes beyond an acronym. So I'd like to think about, or have us think about, creative ways to lead this and inspire, our students to be leaders, our staff to be leaders, kind of integrated throughout. For me, I would like to see the evidence for all of our choices to the forefront, which doesn't necessarily mean the data that we've collected here, but also if we've made a academic choice, is it true that, people like K through 8 schools, you know, or that's good for children. That is something that would be helpful for me. Even when it's presented to us, just like a link, you know, to the article, I think would be helpful to see. Also, I think that an inherent challenge of Orange Unified is that we would like to offer similar programs, you know, at our schools and have a graduate profile. However, all of our schools are so different, right? And thinking about how to balance, you know, having this graduate profile and the differences in all of our schools. And so somewhat related to that, just a thought, I would like to make sure that our principals feel supported with the district information. So I think at some point earlier this year, there was like a safety PowerPoint, you know, given to the principals. Is like, if you would like to make this, you know, at your PTA meeting, you know, here's this resource. So I really was glad to see that, and it came up at, you know, my own children's home and school league meeting. I think those are helpful, and PowerPoints are easily posted, you know, on the internet for people to flip through with links and all of that. Related also to our resource guide, I think is really awesome, and I'd love to see that utilized more. I'm not sure if this is helpful or applicable, but we've been talking about a graduate profile for our seniors and high schoolers, but should we have one for our elementary school or students and our middle school, you know, when they're finishing 6th grade, you know, what do we want them to have accomplished, you know, at all of those different levels, I think might also be helpful. I mentioned previously kind of thinking about the marketing. For me, I recently heard an ad on the radio for another school district, and it's, did you know that we offer TK? And I've loved to see our ads in the circle, you know, about we have this available, you know, so thinking about all of those innovative ways to communicate what we're doing. And in terms of the communication part and the community outreach part, much of it focused on families, which makes sense, but also I'd like to see us highlight the nonprofits and the businesses. And I noted that recently we've started, I don't remember what it's called, but where we're going to highlight a new community partner or business, you know, once a month or whatever it is. I like that idea. And something else that I would like to see and make sure is a part of the plan is our connectedness with local colleges. And that might be in Santiago, but it doesn't need to be that. It can be Cal State Fullerton or UC Irvine, or, you know, we have a broad array of colleges in the area and ways to connect them. I think there's a lot of potential there from what we already have. Thank you.
Actually, I was just going to reverse the question to you all, like the team that prepared the presentation, because honestly, I think this could be like a two-way form of communication of, obviously, we're not going to have all the answers tonight, and this is a fluid document, and that we can continue to do check-ins, because I'm sure there are things to come up, and this board's very well experienced or embedded in the community, and that we would be more than willing to offer that if needed.
Great. Thank you.
One thing that we've actually talked about previously, and perhaps it's even done in some way, but I've always wanted to have, you know, we talk about this graduate profile, and I do love the idea of having a profile of like elementary, middle school, whatever. I think that that's actually really interesting. But we talk about a graduate profile, but every year we do these surveys and we get 22,000, you know, responses. We don't always get 22,000, but we get a lot of responses about what people want in the future. But we really don't do a lot of reflection on whether we've actually so in the future, we'll have this graduate profile. We should be asking seniors, how do we do? Like, how do you feel? How prepared? Like almost like exit interviews. And then maybe periodically throughout high school, tracking that. I don't know exactly how to do that, but I think that that would be something, it would help us pivot if we aren't doing things correctly, but also we need to know that we've actually accomplished. We're going to do all these great things, but we need to know we accomplished it and sort of communicated it. So reflective data at some point in the future, I think would be really valuable.
Thank you for that. I think once upon a time, there was a senior survey. Am I making that up? Right, okay. And still do it right now, right? And so we can probably get that information to trustees if it's applicable. Not right now, but it helps for the development, I think. And that's an excellent point for us to really check our understanding and create some accountability about what we're doing. Any other questions or comments? All right. Well, thank you both. I appreciate your dutifulness in this particular endeavor, and we're looking forward to updates and a lot of success.
Thank you, Board.
Thank you. Okay. Okay. Moving to work study 3B, which is the Orange Unified School District Campus Improvement Program. Passing this over to our superintendent, Dr. Menares.
Okay, so it's almost like we teed it up for this, right? I am pleased to share, Board, first just to remind you how much money just this school year you have already dedicated to campus improvement for the district. And you'll hear about it in this presentation, but it's $57.7 million that you've already said, this is a priority, and we need to start seeing something come out of it. And so you've put your money where that priority is, listening to the community. Tonight, we're gonna bring forward to you a reminder of the deferred maintenance that you already approved last board meeting, a reminder of the security improvements that you approved, I believe it was September when I started, and then our recommendation on the $40 million that you approved in December on this campus improvement program. I want to thank Mr. Calderon, who has jumped in. This is, I don't even know if it's 2 full weeks that he's been here. Maybe it's 2 weeks and
Maybe
one
2
day.
weeks.
I think tomorrow will be 2 weeks and 1 day. But he heard the urgency. He has seen the urgency, and so working with the team, he has a plan that he would like to share with you. Tonight is just to make sure you have all the information you need and ask questions. Our plan then is to take what you give to us and bring back something for approval at the next regularly scheduled board meeting on February 19th. So with that, I'll turn it over to Mr. Calderon.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dr. Menares. Mr. President, members of the board, it is a pleasure to be here. And facilities is something close to my heart, particularly when we can improve learning environments. So this is something that I jumped in with both feet to see if we can get going as quickly as possible. I have with us this evening Mr. Harlan and Mr. Sanchez, who worked with me collaboratively to come up with this. Obviously, with 40 sites, it can be quite a daunting task to come up with a program that is designed around what you have allocated and committed for us to spend in improving our facilities across the district. So I want to just start off very quickly is because of the task at hand, I kind of set a little vision for what we were trying to accomplish. I'll just read the vision, but you can see the objectives there. It was to create school environments that are safe, welcoming, and functional, spaces that reflect the value we place on students, support learning, and rebuild confidence in our campuses. So this is kind of like okay, what are we doing, right? And then we kind of broke it down into these objectives, which are improving the student experience, improving the curb appeal of our facilities, addressing these deferred needs that have been around for, and then I'll share a little more about that. Also, because I know it sounds like a lot of money, but spreading that over 28 or 32 campuses, that the money becomes very tight. So we needed to do that in a very efficient manner so that we can get the most bang for our buck with these dollars. And that is deploying these resources strategically. So taking a step back, you know that we have quite a bit of comments and feedback about our facilities. You saw that in the listening tour, and like Dr. Menara said, I don't think we could have teed this up better. Because the top priority is our facilities. So why is it that these facilities are garnering so much attention, right? And so I went back and I looked at what the district has been spending, and not just deferred maintenance, but just what have we been spending on our capital facilities. And so when you look at that, you can see that in the last 10 years, we kind of established that a good positive number to be spending is about $6.5 million a year on deferred maintenance to barely keep up with the needs of our facilities. Well, if you look at the last 10 years, there has been very little invested in the facilities, right? And so that is what is what you're seeing when you go out to these facilities is we've got a limited crew that can handle work orders, and those are the pressing needs. And we have a very limited landscaping crew, which can barely do what they call the mowing and blowing, right? Getting out there, mowing the lawns and doing the leaf removal, right? And so what that means is that the facilities aren't getting anything to like get them lifted up, right? So that kind of sets where we are. You have been presented what is our deferred maintenance schedule or cycle that shows that in the next couple of years, we have probably to spend about $140 million just to keep up with the maintenance. And so we've got some big things coming up. Most of the HVAC systems in your facilities have not been replaced, right? And those have a life cycle max in the 15 to 20, 25 years. If you're lucky, you get 25 years, and then they start really failing. Well, we're seeing some of that in the summers with the systems can't keep up with the heat cycles, right? So we've divided up those things into major categories: the envelope of buildings, right? Roofs, walls, systems, painting. We have the core systems: HVAC, electrical, fire, life safety, technology, grounds and hardscapes, and athletic facilities. So I'm walking you through kind of the process that we went through to come up with this plan, because you set aside that $40 million. Now, what are we doing? You saw last board meeting, we presented $7.4 million in summer deferred maintenance programs. That does hit fire alarms, hits roofs, hits painting and asphalt, and it's barely skimming the surface, right? We're just trying to get as much as we can done with the money we have. That's planned for this summer. Also, you'll see that you have, as a board, authorized to move forward on a couple of important projects. Using some E-rate funding, we're replacing a lot of technology, switches, access points at all the schools. And network switches at all the elementaries. We're doing some front door access control ring systems at 31 schools, right? The ones that don't have it. MPR, 13 sites are getting a big improvement in lighting, stage lifts, the projectors, screens, that kind of thing, to help improve some of our MPRs. And then we're undertaking a new IP speaker communication project, which is a $5 million project. We're rolling it out at one site right now as a test site, and that is to integrate a lot of the comm systems in our schools. That'll also be integrated in some of the safety features in the schools. All major fantastic improvements. So you can see that when you add the $40 million, as Dr. Menara said, we're in that $57, $58 million mark. That's a good investment in the district, and it should catch us up on a lot of the deferred maintenance issues that we have. So let's talk about it. I've called it the Campus Improvement Program, right? This is just kind of give it a name so we can refer to it. And what are we going to do? We're going to do some we're going to focus on campus appearances, student safety, learning environments, and accessibility, usability. What we're not going to be doing is full modernization of any site. Obviously, with $40 million, you would barely get one site. We're not doing any major building reconfigurations or any large capital construction. That you really do need to rely on large influxes of funds like bond programs or where you have developer fees that have accumulated over the years. So we're not going to be able to touch those areas, but we do want to focus, and as Dr. Menard said, and the same principles that we relied on when we did the deferred maintenance, we're going to focus on safety. We're going to focus on the age of facilities and the condition of the facilities for where we select to do some of these projects, right? We need to go tackle the ones that are in the most need. So let's talk about the project types. We're going to be doing shaded outdoor learning areas, playgrounds, play areas, improved lighting, student gathering areas we're going to improve, playground surfacing and equipment, and then we're going to do some fit. We're going to attack the fits. The fit is the facility inspection tool, which is the tool that is that we use, that's mandated by CDE to inspect our facilities. Those inspections are graded, and they end up in our SARCs, right? The outward-facing documents. And those things are, your facilities are good, fair, poor. When they're poor, they end up reflecting poorly on the district in our SARCs and in our public-facing documents. Because of the state of our facilities, some of those ratings have started to drop significantly, and we have been in a big need to attack those. So we want to put a lot of attention on the fits, and we want to get all of those up so that our facilities are rating in the good category, and then we don't have, because all of that cascades down into Williams complaints and all kinds of other areas that we want to avoid staying away from. The other thing is on the curb appeal, because you have asked us to really focus on having our campuses pop, right? Look nice. We want our community, when they come visit our campuses, that say, yes, I want to send my child here, right? That's the effect that we want to get. That's well, I'll call it the curb appeal, right? That's going to be our entryways into the campuses, our landscaping, right? It's our basically painting the buildings, right? Having the paint maintained on the buildings, getting the shrubs and things look nice. Some of the campuses that I visited, you can tell the landscaping hasn't been touched probably in 20 years. And so the bushes are overgrown. Some of them have died. So you have places where there are gaps. It just doesn't look nice, right? And so what we want to do is we want to tackle some of that in a cost-effective way so that we're not spending millions and millions of dollars on just landscaping, right? We also want to do some focus. We want to increase the number of campuses that are getting the asphalt, slurry, and restriping, because that does elevate the perception of a campus. Unfortunately, people notice those kinds of things, right? And then there are a couple of campuses that you probably know better than I do that we have some serious challenges with drop-off and pickup, right? Those, we know they're located on major transit ways, and you get a bottleneck. And so we're going to look at some ways to improve some of the drop-off and pickup at some of the most challenging sites. We won't be able to tackle them all, but hey, let's make a jump in the right direction in those. We also did a lot of listening, like Dr. Menares has done, and I did a lot of listening to the principals, right? Elena helped me put together a survey so that we could say, what are your needs? What do you need on your campuses? And can we tackle some of those? And we did. We got some great feedback in terms of needing more shade structures, needing areas for kids to eat lunch, more picnic tables, things. We've gotten some marquees, believe it or not. A lot of requests for, hey, we need marquees. There are other schools that have them, we don't, kind of thing. And you see lighting, walkway hazards, things like that need to be improved, entry points that need to be improved. So we listened, we added those to our project list. Of course, there were some requests that were beyond what we could afford, and so those will probably be categorized so that we can take those up when we have some more money. So how am I going to tackle this? Because this is a lot of work, and $40 million is a limited amount of money. we're going to pull in 2 crews that are going to be multi-trade crews, 5-member crews. We're going to have a plumber, an electrician, carpenter, painter, and a supervisor. Those crews will camp out at a particular elementary school and tackle a lot of the past work orders that aren't getting done, some of the big maintenance problems. They'll be able to, go in and take out old cabinetry, because we'll have a carpenter, replace countertops, fix sinks, replace toilet fixtures, like get the stuff that we can do our own crews, right? We'd have 2 of those crews. They'll bring all the supplies with them. They'll stay at the site for a week, 2 weeks, until they get all the work done. There'll be night crews. So they'll come in after school lets out, so that way we don't disrupt the educational environment. And then we could shift them possibly to a day shift schedule in the summer, so that when the campuses are not being utilized, or if they're being utilized, keep them on a night crew basis, right? If we have 2 of those, I think we can get quite a bit of this done. I'm estimating that it'll take us about 10 months, and we can knock out just about every elementary school and the middle schools. And that'll be the focus of this program. Also, yeah, you want to? Yeah, I'm happy to answer questions.
Sorry. Is it okay if I ask a question about the crews? Because I'm thinking, would they be doing it based on work orders, or they just go in and say, I see that that's a problem and I'll just fix it?
Well, we'll take all the past work orders that they haven't been able to get to.
Okay.
And then on top of that, our supervisors are going to be out there, and they're going to go through the facilities and give them tasks to complete, because we do want them to do stuff that's not on the list.
So it's not necessarily site-generated work orders.
Exactly. This will be generated from the district office, and we'll have some priority items, like I said, replacing, countertops and cabinets that are, date back to the 60s and 70s. We just need to pull that stuff out, put in some modern, more efficient use of space material, right? We do the same thing with landscape crews, 2 landscape crews. These would have three people on them. And we're going to hire a landscape designer that will work with us to design landscaping for all the elementary schools, and we'll have our own crews do as much of that as we can, replacing trees, replacing bushes, putting in the mulch, reconfiguring, adding stuff where we have just lots of asphalt and no planters or anything to bring up the facilities. These crews are actually quite important, because our high school projects have added lots of planters. And so my thought is those are going to have to be maintained over time. So because the folks that we have that do the mowing the lawn and take care of the open fields and the leaves, they can't get to the huge volume of planters that were done at the high schools. And so these crews, when we complete some of this work on the elementary, then can move on to the high schools and maintain those, so that we don't let them go into disrepair. So I think that will be a very useful use of those crews. We'll continue to do smaller projects, asphalting, painting, with using some of the tools that we have for outside contracting, CUPCA, piggyback bids, CMAS, for some of the playgrounds, things like that, so that we can accelerate some of these projects and we don't have long lead times for replacing things. On the playgrounds, we, in all likelihood, will have to go through DSA. Those are the DSA is very particular about playgrounds. Even though we're replacing, some of the fall areas need to be reconfigured and accessibility needs to be looked at. So we will be using some architects for those pieces, but we're going to try to accelerate them as quickly as possible. The next slide just kind of breaks up the work that's being done by each of the different techniques, right? I didn't talk about one of the things that I'd like to do is in the classrooms at Fairhaven. I'll get the names of the schools. The district has replaced the teaching walls with some very nice modular sliding whiteboards and a projector, interactive screens. We'd like to do that at a couple more campuses. And so that one we would contract with an outside company to come in and replace those. I don't know that we'll be able to do those during the school year, but probably those we'd leave it for the summer so that we can knock out a couple of schools during the summer months, right? And I think those we would prioritize those schools that really are in the worst shape in terms of the teaching spaces, right? And then here you can see we kind of have some shade structures. We need to relocate portable buildings or add some portable buildings at some sites. Unfortunately, there's some that are overcrowded, some have excess portable buildings. So we kind of need to shift those around a little bit so that we can accommodate some of the growing CARES program, the TK program that needs unique facilities, and we don't have enough space in the areas of high demand. So those will be included in this as well. I have an image here of just the teaching walls that we installed at Fairhaven, and you can see the difference between an older facility that just doesn't have really a teaching space when you look at the monitor and in terms of the whiteboards and stuff. So this will give additional cabinets, storage space, and we'll give them some nice whiteboards so that the teachers can use to improve their learning environments. So here's the total breakdown. This is a rough schedule of allocation of cost. I'll start kind of at the bottom. We wanted to set aside a little bit of a program reserve because things come up as we're doing things, and we want to be able to adjust as needed for projects that may not have been anticipated as we go in and start work. But you can see the top two are the project crews, the landscaping crews. You're looking, in the ballpark of about $1.5 million for the project crews, and with all the landscaping supplies that we're estimating to need, it's about $1.6 million on that. That most of it is landscaping materials, trees, brushes, bushes, things like that, mulch, to improve the facilities. Teaching wall systems, we're looking at trying to get 5 elementaries done if we can. I think that would be a really good improvement. We have some parking and drop-off improvements that we want to do. As you can imagine, if we can reconfigure, we can solve some of the congestion. We want to add 3 repaving jobs to elementaries. We didn't have enough money with the 7.4, so if we add 3 more, we get ahead of our schedule on deferred maintenance. Slurry and striping, replacing playgrounds at 5 elementaries. It may be fewer elementaries if some of them have multiple playground sets that are in bad shape, and some of them are just safety concerns that we need to address. And marquees, we're looking at adding 4 marquees. We want to create a standard for the district so that we can start to kind of have a consistency across the sites for marquees. And then we can work in areas where the PTA has raised some money. We can work with them and maybe stretch the dollars a little bit further. And then we have some really delayed deferred maintenance stuff. There's some windows that need to be replaced and some HVAC systems that, as you know, are on their last legs. And so we've set aside a little bit of money to be able to go tackle some of the sites that are on their last legs, right? And then I just want to commit to you that we want to be very transparent and accountable with this money. I think it's important for you to see what we're doing. So I commit to you to come back to you regularly to give you an update on where we are, what we've done, and also to include any changes or reflect any changes that we're going to have. I also want to develop kind of a dashboard that we can put up on the website so people know that's coming, or they know the work's been completed at their sites. And so we're working on putting something together for that as well. So hopefully we can deliver some upgraded learning environments, and enhance student experiences and the safety of the site, and deliver these visible results so that the community is proud of its schools. I'm happy to answer any questions. I hope I didn't talk too fast.
I think you did fine. Thank you for the presentation. I appreciate that. I just want to start and ask the question real quick about the relocation of the portables. And so what are we looking at? Where are we trying to get them from? I know we've mentioned El Medina, we've mentioned other schools. Is that a matter of identifying them and removing, like getting rid of them? Or is that moving them elsewhere? What does that look like?
So there's a desire by the district to remove as many portables as we can. So to the extent that we can remove, just fully remove portables, we'll pick the ones that are in the worst shape and demolish them or just simply get rid of them. Those that are in a decent state, to the extent that they're needed in another site, we'll have those relocated. I'm starting to get requests. I have not, I haven't gone through them yet carefully, but I know primarily in sort of the early childhood area and TK is where it seems like there's a demand in sites that don't have space, empty space and empty classrooms. And so those are the ones that we would relocate the portables if they're in good shape.
Thank you for that answer. Questions from board colleagues?
Well, thank you for that. This is actually very exciting. It's like Christmas. Thank you for doing that. This is very aggressive, and I'm looking forward to it. It's long, long overdue. I don't have any questions right now. I might have more specific ones as we go along about certain sites once we get to see the list. Because in the back of my mind, I know there are some sites that need some work, but I don't know where they fall into the priorities.
Yeah, and we didn't put names of schools because that's
understand.
part of that is we're still assessing which ones are in the most need. But for me, it was very important to figure out a way to show that we're making progress as quickly as possible because the sites really need it and the kids deserve it. The money doesn't do us any good sitting in an account. It's time
In
to spend
fact, I
it.
was at a FICMAT meeting, and they were saying that we really need to be investing into our schools in the year that we get the monies.
Exactly.
Yeah, so, thank you.
Questions? Trustee Erickson.
Yay. Thank you. This is wonderful. Obviously, I have a huge passion for facilities as well because it does bring all of those things together. It brings together student wellness. It brings together a good, none of us can work in an environment where the lighting is bad, the air conditioning is bad. None of us would find that acceptable in our professional lives, I don't know, the courtrooms are pretty bad, but that's another story. So this really, truly does bring all of those things together, and it brings together pride in schools. It helps teachers feel better about, when they have these teaching walls, they can be more organized and, all of that. So all of these things are fabulous, super happy. Obviously, it's spreading money really thin, and so we are getting a lot of a little. Does that make sense? Like, we're definitely spreading it. Which I understand that's a strategy, and I do think that's good. The one question I do have, the one thing I do want to talk about is with certain projects, we can qualify for matching funds. And I know a lot of those are bigger projects than what we can do, but is there, I just want to make sure we're analyzing it so that maybe if we're spreading $10 million over 5 schools, we might be better off doing, a $5 million project somewhere else that's going to generate $3 million back in matching funds that we can then take and put somewhere else. So I know you haven't been here that long, so you probably haven't been able to do that whole analysis at all, and I'm not saying you should have. But I am concerned about that, and it is something that I think is we don't want to leave money on the table, especially when it comes to facilities. And so I'm not asking you to do that now, but is it flexible enough that if something comes up and you can say, you know what, actually that would be a better use of the money because then we can get it back and then we can reinvest that money? Is it flexible enough to do that?
It is. And so obviously not all of it. A lot of it is we're spending on our own staff and stuff. The projects that we can submit for reimbursement, we will. What it will be required are projects with an architect, stamp plans and DSA approval, because that's what's a prerequisite to receiving any kind of funding. And as you know, the funding right now is pretty much exhausted, and we would be in line for whatever the next bond is, which we should be. But we will definitely do that analysis, and in whatever pieces of this that we can do that, we will do that for sure.
Okay. So I do have a question. I mean, our 7.4 million is aggressive, and I'm want to make sure that we do have that capacity. I know that we have challenges, personnel challenges. I mean, it's just a fact. Our department is stretched thin. Are we going to be able to take that aggressive action and really, do you believe we're going to actually be able to get that done?
I believe we will. We are, by the same token, taking an aggressive approach to hiring the staff that we need to run those programs, right? So we have in the process of hiring 2 project managers and 2 project coordinators, because we're going to need, feet on the ground, hands at the sites, so that we can oversee the amount of work that's, but we do believe that it can be done. Obviously, we're going to put a supervisor on those crews so that those crews are adequately supervised to be running and doing as much work as they can.
And is that coming from our own people?
Yes.
Okay, so that's what I want to make sure, because obviously they're the experts in Orange Unified.
Yes.
You bring in somebody else, and great, they'll have the time to do it, because a lot of times we're getting, emergencies here and there, but they definitely don't know Orange Unified. So I want to make sure that we're integrating, our staff with that, so that we can respect their historical knowledge on that.
That's a very good point.
One of the, so you did give us a list of all the deferred maintenance that we've done in the past, and I will just add to this. So we've always done right around, I want to say around 4 million a year. And then obviously you can see, 21, 22, that was post-COVID.
It dropped down, yeah.
And then, we had to kind of cut it back. I will say, just for your information, for a lot of the projects we did in that we did deferred maintenance or we did things like new HVAC systems, but we were utilizing COVID money. So it wasn't necessarily in the deferred maintenance category,
I looked
but
at all
we were
projects.
doing that. Yeah.
I looked at, so this included anything that was funded from any source of funding
Okay.
that was in capital improvements.
Got it.
So yes,
Okay.
yeah. So this does include some of that. It didn't get very far.
Right. It wasn't necessarily allocated as deferred maintenance.
Right, right.
One thing for curb appeal, this is a hugely expensive component, but also in some areas super necessary, and that's fencing. Our fencing is horrific on so many campuses, but I do know that that's a really expensive piece of it. But I would like to be able to consider that strategically in certain areas where we could do it in a way that might not blow the budget, but that makes a huge, you're right, landscaping is enormous. Maintaining landscaping is enormous. But fencing, you put nice landscaping behind or next to a rusted out 50-year-old, 40-year-old fence, it still looks crappy. Frankly.
Yeah. And
So how do we address that? Or can we?
I'm definitely looking at fencing. That's a high priority. That's a little bit of a personal preference thing. I'm not a big fan of the slats and the chain link fence. I just don't think it looks very attractive.
I agree with you.
But I don't know what other solutions we could look at as a possibility. Obviously the nicest is to have some wrought iron, but wrought iron, it doesn't have, a barrier for sight. And I know that a lot of campuses want the sight limited. So there's some trade-offs there. I'll be looking at that.
Maybe
as
we
well.
can just strategically do some and make some of those improvements. And again,
Yeah.
if we do one or two and it doesn't turn out to be the way that we wanted, we can improve something
do
somewhere
something
else,
different at
you
another
know?
site, yes.
I mean, some of it is going to be hit and miss. It just is. That's just the nature of it. Okay. Developer fees you had mentioned, we obviously have a lot of potential funding, about $100 million in developer fees sitting out there that we can potentially use. That this is not that. Just to make sure that the part of this $40 million has nothing to do with those developer fees, and
That's correct.
that's for future planning.
I am looking at every source of funding that we have to see what we can do on the facility side, because that is a priority. It's a high priority. So
Right. And a lot was set aside in different buckets at certain points, and so it's a matter of, it's like a, Easter egg hunt.
yeah, I'm looking for
have
them.
to find
I'm
it.
looking for it. I'll find it all.
Okay. Then the last thing, just in terms of landscaping, and this may be my own personal preference, but I do want to make sure that we are really environmentally cognizant, that we are not ripping out native plants and mowing and blowing and, destroying things. I want to be thoughtful about that and make sure that we are being environmentally responsible, and also respecting certain areas. And that's going to be, and you'll have to find out, in certain areas that's really important. Other areas they don't care so much about it, but I want to make sure that we're cognizant of that as we go, because landscaping has become sensitive in certain areas, and so that may be something that you want to make sure you kind of get your feelers out there.
These gentlemen are keeping me in line with that. But yeah, just generally we want drought resistant and native plants when we do anything. And by the same token, we want to make sure that we're not putting something that's not kid-friendly, right? So, because that's the other side of it. There's some plants that are just not good for kids to have around
No
kids.
cactus.
Yeah.
Right.
Cactus, or those trees that have those red berries that kids love to throw at the wall, right?
Right. Those are great. Yeah, I mean, some of those things, they look pretty in the short term, and in the long term, they're horrible. That we know there's lots of roots that are there at our campuses and things like that. And
Yeah.
so to the extent maybe we even use turf in some areas, that would be nice. Anyway,
Yep.
that's my 2 cents, or 4 cents, or whatever.
Great comments. Thank you, Dr. Erickson.
So, adding to all the points that have already been stated, one thing that stuck with me was the outdoor environments and the playground structures that need to be upgraded. And I love your points about how we need to improve them so that they're also accessible to all students. And that's been a key thing anytime we do any improvement, especially if it's been there for decades. Another thing that I'm wondering if you could potentially have a conversation with is ed services. And the reason behind that is, if we're going to improve our outdoor environment, the outdoor environment's so much more than play structures. And if we're acknowledging that there's increased behaviors, they're most likely happening during unstructured times when they're all outside, when there's one person supervising 60 to 80 children. And so why not take this opportunity, if we're going to improve the outdoor environment with the play structure, to also look at other things that could be added outside. And so if there's a collaboration between both departments on what the outside could look like to reduce those behaviors. And so I don't know, if there's like a lot of running, right? Like tagging and different things like that. And right now schools are implementing those policies of like, okay, well, we're not going to play tag. Instead of it being a negative message from teachers and principals on children saying like, these are the behaviors you can't have, but we're not offering an alternative of what could happen. We just have open fields at most of our elementary schools of like, here, you have 20 minutes to go outside and figure out what you're gonna do. Most likely there's gonna be conflict. And so what can we invest in our outdoor environments to really enhance, whether it's SEL or relationship building or other things that are priorities that happen as an extension of what happens in the classroom.
You're speaking to my heart. So yes, we will definitely do that. Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you for this plan. I know you haven't been here long, so I appreciate you taking the time to dive right in. I'd also like to thank my colleagues for making the decision to invest in our facilities. It's been a priority for me. Many great things have already been said, but I'll reiterate and probably add some more of my own. First, I want to make sure that we communicate to the public that we have the money for this and that we are fiscally solvent. We've talked a lot about many different sources, and I have the confidence that you are exhausting all of those areas. I'm not sure if it's the case, and we haven't discussed, I'd love for everyone to get something. You know, I understand that there's different needs, but it would be great if, you know, each school site gets something. I don't know.
You know, I think the commitment is to at least paint all the sites. So they will all be painted by the end of the summer, if they haven't been painted recently, right? So if they've been painted in the last year. But the plan is to try to hit all the sites. We will,
Okay.
I'm going to keep those crews on until all the sites have been addressed.
And with regard to paint, right? There's different colors at different sites, and everyone wants to know, like, why is this site this color and why is this site, you know? So kind of communicating some of those things that just people in the community are wondering.
Okay.
I was also going to say the same comment about sustainability, and kind of in conjunction with what Trustee Martinez Goodlander said. Maybe we can combine a little bit with student projects. So, for example, and what the parent groups are, you know, doing. So, for example, I know at Palmyra, they got a bunch of trees and they planted them together on the outside of the fence. And, you know, there's things that can be done. Or, you know, let's see how this one little plot of grass, you know, grows, and let's make a little science experiment out of it or something. You know what I mean? Like there's also interesting opportunities that can happen there with regard to, you know, learning and science. And I'd like to see, you know, to the extent that we can, you know, some of those explored. I know much of it will happen during the summer when, you know, students aren't present, but that would be nice. With regard to the access points and the controls, we don't need to discuss them in detail, but at least what I've heard from community members is that a lot of people are wondering about that. You know, why do different sites have this? And just kind of making sure that we are explaining, you know, where people are on the list. I love the idea of a dashboard, but like, why does this site have this sort of entry? And, you know, kind of what is the reasoning behind that? So communicating with the stakeholders just about the why, you know, behind the choices that were made, not just what, but, you know, because it's one thing to say, you know, we're painting your site, but more like we're painting your site because the last time it was done was this time, you know, like some more information. We discussed this, or you discussed this a little bit. I want to make sure that we check in with the PTAs and the parent groups because they're not at all the school sites, but some are raising money, you know, and they have plans to like go out and buy a marquee, you know, so we want to make sure that they're not buying one and then we're buying one, and it's kind of complex. And there's also interest at some places to donate things, you know, so part of, and this shouldn't be something that's necessary, you know, and it shouldn't be the case that, you know, our families come to want to do that, but the availability is there and people have ideas, you know, about what they might be able to contribute, whether it's, you know, maybe someone owns a nursery or something. I also want to make sure that we check in with our neighbors about, you know, kind of letting them know if there's, you know, potential noise or, you know, additional traffic in the area, you know, just kind of upfronting that information so it's not a surprise. We want to be good neighbors to everyone. And we didn't mention this, and I'm not totally sure how it works, but my understanding is that we have a yard of extra stuff, you know, and I'd love to see that cleaned out or utilized, you know, so I don't know if like we're clearing out a cabinet, you know, does that mean it goes to the trash or does that mean it goes to, you know, this place of extra things that can be moved somewhere else, you know, so to the extent that we can, I'd love to reuse things if that is necessary. You know, sometimes we don't necessarily need to replace everything, but move it around. I also would really urge us, something I have heard over and over from everyone, is storage. Just always being mindful of, you know, Cares wants to store their things over here, and there's not enough storage for the violins. And, teachers love, I would love in my classroom, the wall, where there's storage. So just kind of always thinking about the functionality of every space so that we can maximize, the small areas that we have.
Yeah.
So, thank you.
I can provide some additional information over in your Friday reports, but storage is a concern, I think, at every school site in the world, right? There's just not ever enough space to put stuff. But these are very good points, and we'll definitely take into consideration our neighbors and the PTAs. I know we've been talking about, there's a lot of pride when a PTA donates something, and I think they actually enjoy doing it, having a little plaque, or they said they donated this. And so what we're trying to do is, to the extent that PTAs can't raise enough to get something, that we can match it, or we can help them get to that point, so that we have a marquee that are consistent. I mentioned the marquees, but there are other things. We have gotten a lot of requests from the elementary schools for gardens, and so those are areas that we can build them garden beds and work with them if they want to have some kind of a program, particularly if we've got some community members that have that expertise, right? So yes, all very good points. Would definitely take them into consideration.
Okay. I have one more question.
Sure.
Obviously, our school sites and students are the priorities, but it wasn't mentioned anything about the district office site, like how does that fit into the plan, or if it's even part of this plan? And I think the well-being of our employees here is important as well, and we need to provide a good working environment for employees. And one other consideration, I don't know if it even fits into this in the future or something, is like our boardroom. I saw pictures recently, and this is a place of collaboration. We have not only board meetings here, but we have our staff meet here. They do professional development, and we do our award ceremonies and acknowledgments. And what's happening, it's really packed in here. We have senior day, and kids are sitting on the counters over there. And but the most important thing is that it's divisive. We have two areas. One side cannot see the other side. And in contentious, and I'm thinking about the future because you never know, during contentious board meetings, they don't see each other. And when they don't see each other, you don't have a face. And so it makes it so that they are more apt to argue. They're more apt to, not know who they're arguing with. They don't see that there's a child over there, or that there's a grandmother over here. And so this is something that's been on my mind for a long, long, long time, because, one side sits there, one side sits there. So there's a lot of components, not just the board meetings, but the staff considerations, and it's packed in here. So I don't. That might be a bigger plan, but it's just like, I don't know.
That's a whole separate
For
study
me,
session.
it's like, do we just knock two walls down?
Dr. Menares has tasked me with taking a look at this issue, so
Okay.
I'm certain that we'll be bringing back a study session on this, because there are some options. The question always is the tolerance for expending money on outside of schools and outside of classrooms,
Right.
when the schools are in such need. So
I
that's something
agree.
I'm very
That is a
confident.
priority, so
Yeah.
I'm not saying that, but just in the back of your mind, this is to support our staff as well.
Yeah. I think everybody who works in this complex feels it, and it's certainly something that I have present every day.
First of all, thank you for all your hard work on this. I know how much goes into it. About the district office, I've never heard that, the schools need to come first before, but I'm just kidding. Anyway, just want to touch on a couple of comments. I'm super happy to see that there's going to be front door access. My building at my facility just installed all access to all doors with the badge, and it works wonderful with 200 people coming in and out every day. focusing on safety is a huge thing for me, as well as the drop-off and pickup. I wish you luck on that. I know some schools will be easier than others, but I've been involved in a lot of that at my district as well, and it's definitely needed, having driven into every school, I think, in this district in a 40-foot bus. And the marquees, the only question I have, I don't expect an answer, but it's very odd to me. I walk my dog by Cambridge regularly, and why would they put it so low is my question. Most that I see are, you know, way up, and to me, I don't know, I think of vandalism, unfortunately. But that was my only question. Again, I don't expect an answer, but this is great. I probably have a lot more I could touch on, but I'm not going to. And thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Anyone else? Any other board colleague comments? So I'll just wrap this up by saying, again, thank you, to reiterate what my colleagues have already said. This definitely speaks to the needs that we already have been presented. So as you mentioned, teeing it up, that's exactly what happened. Thank you for that. It responds directly to community concerns. It responds directly to student experiences, not both in the survey, but also qualitatively. And it's going to be something that we can see, we can visually see and appreciate. So thank you very much for the presentation, for the vision. We appreciate that. And, you know, get to work, Yuri. What are you doing? Why are you still standing there?
Well, thank you.
All right. Let's go. Thank you very much. All right. So at this point, I believe we have taken care of all business. So I'd like to entertain a motion to adjourn the meeting. Trustee Thomas? Anyone want a second? Everyone wants to stay? Okay. Trustee Vane? Been properly moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We are adjourning at 7:04 p.m. Have a good weekend.